Kate Lansing, welcome back to the Rocky Mountain Writer podcast.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. I always love chatting with you.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Got a brand new book on the way. Number what in the series? Number
Number
three?
four. Number
Number
four.
four. Okay, yeah.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
It's gone fast.
Yeah. And that's coming right out in March, early March.
Early March. Yep, March 7th. Yes, so you can
And I
look
got
forward.
got another awful groaning title to go with it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I love this one. My editor and I came up with this one together. And it was so
Wow.
funny because when we settled on it, both of us were like, that's it. That's perfect. It's just punny enough. It's a cozy mystery. So those puns in the title are especially important. The name of it is Till Death Do Us Port. So yeah,
There you go.
yeah.
Uh, I don't even know what to say. That pun is that's really just you just ponder the depth of just amazing, use of the language and how, I mean, puns are great. Puns are great. I give you a hard time, but puns are great. That's for
Oh,
sure.
this one has to be better than Mauled to Death. I remember I told you that one, and you visibly rolled your eyes like, no.
That's great.
But it
Well,
works,
yeah. Well, we want to talk about Till Death Do Us Part first. And just so folks know, we're going to talk about that a little bit. And then we want to get into a kind of a bigger topic just on the pros and cons of writing a series. So we're just going to kind of move through what's happening with book 4. We're going to go into that a little bit. And we might also talk about how you keep tropes fresh, how you honor the tropes, I guess, in some ways, and how you also need to mix it up a little bit. So that's kind of what we're going to get into first. But for those who don't know, Kate, set up the series a little bit for us, just as a general, and then take us into what's happening in the 4th book.
Yeah, so the series, it's called the Colorado Wine Mystery Series. So as you might guess, it's about a winery owner, a vintner, who expertly pairs wine with solving murders as sort of the tagline. But it follows Parker Valentine is my protagonist, and she has this dream. Her passion is winemaking, and so she opens her own winery. And then it's a cozy mystery, so there's that hook there, and the winemaking is the hook. But each book sort of follows her as she is solves a new crime and gets embroiled in some, in murder, and follows her along. And so in the 4th book, Till Death Do Us Port, there is a wedding going on. It's for her cousin. And so she is in charge of bringing refreshments, her wines. And of course, there is a murder. And it was really, really fun to write this one. It is a very sort of annoying wedding planner bites the dust early on. So right at the height of the wedding procession. So anyway, that is Till Death Do Us Port.
And where does this one take place?
This one also, so they all take place in Boulder pretty much, except for the 3rd book. She goes on a ski getaway up to the mountains, which is really fun. So Colorado, local, Boulder is where this one takes place in June. It's a beautiful time of year there.
Yeah, I remember the wedding, not the wedding though. I remember the mountain trip. I think it was Winter Park or someplace like Winter Park.
Someplace like Winter Park. I made it. I try and fictionalize things like that. Some of them. Sometimes I include real places, and sometimes I sort of make up my own. But yeah, kind of like Winter Park, kind of like Keystone. Some of my favorite ones.
And I thought maybe Till Death Do Us Port meant that we'd go to Long Beach or New Orleans or Miami, one of the bigger ports.
Oh, and see, port is a type of dessert wine.
I know.
And
I'm giving you a hard time.
Okay, good.
I'm giving you a hard time.
Oh, you're funny.
Yeah, port is delicious. It's kind of sweet, but a good port is really, really tasty.
It's good. And I had never tried it until my editor and I, a little ways into the writing process of this book, decided on the title. And so then I tried it, and then I learned a lot about how it's made and tried to incorporate a lot of some of that as a fun little metaphor and playing with things like that into the story. But yeah, port's super delicious. Nice dessert wine.
Yeah. Any recommendations on certain brands or any particular labels you've come to like?
I don't have any labels I've come to like. I have tried, I like Ruby ports, are the younger ones, and they're a little fruitier. I don't remember the labels that I've
Yeah,
tried, which is
yeah,
horrible. I don't always pay
yeah,
attention to that, even though I
yeah.
probably should writing this series. But they're all from Portugal, which is kind of cool because if you are gonna the name port, it has to come from Portugal. But yeah, I
Hmm.
like the ruby ports, and I actually in these books there's always recipes and wine pairings included at the back because it's a cozy mystery. You see that a lot in that genre. But it was really fun coming up with a dessert using port. I did like an avocado style with some gelato and poured a little port over it with some blackberries, and it was super yummy. So that was fun.
And
Good research.
yeah, how many different batches did you have to make to perfect the recipe, do you think?
That one, I think just two.
Okay.
If even. I mean, it was one of those like I was pretty sure it was gonna work, but it was like getting all of the like how much like the quantities just right because you don't want to. Yeah, and my husband helps taste everything for me, so that's good. So we have it, yeah, hard job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, before we get into sort of the pros and cons of writing a series,
Yeah.
what's happening with your protagonist relationship wise, and are
Mm.
you finding some changes for her as the series goes on that you didn't expect?
Oh yeah. Well, it's so fun. So something about weddings that I knew I wanted to incorporate. So since it's Parker not getting married, she does in the series in book one, she meets a new boyfriend, and then the series sort of follows their relationship a little bit. And at this point, it was a lot of fun to play with their future. So weddings have this way of making everybody think about their own, their own relationships and or their own weddings, or maybe they're remembering the bride and the groom too. But for Parker, it was very much this fork in the road because her boyfriend, he owns a restaurant and he is going to try and open a new one in California. And what does that mean for their future? And so she's seeing her younger cousin get walking down the aisle, and yet she's faced with some uncertainty in her own relationship. And that I think helps raise the stakes a little bit because it makes her emotionally like just already dealing with some stuff, and then there's a murder, and then and so it was a lot of fun to play with those aspects. So yeah, her romantic life is very interesting and fun in this book. The other relationship I have had so much fun playing with is with Parker's mom. And so in the first book, I kind of have it where her mom doesn't quite see winemaking as a viable career choice. I guess she doesn't quite like get it. And her mom is this brilliant scientist. She's a chemist. And so then I've sort of played with this idea of showing Parker and her mom growing closer because winemaking actually involves a ton of science and involves a lot of chemistry, and having them come together with that. And then in this book, have the mom actually be almost her sidekick sleuth because her mom is also at the wedding and it's her family too. And so having it be just a little bit more of a family affair than what I've done before. And that was a lot of fun to write. I loved writing. The mother-daughter relationship is so fun.
Ah, is that drawn from your own life? Do you care to share whether that's something that
Oh, yeah. Oh,
you?
yeah, my mom and I get along great. We're
Okay, yeah,
we're really and yeah, I look up to my mom a lot, and she's also always been a science person. Like she was, she was a geologist and then a science teacher. But we have, the part that didn't stem from me is where Parker and her mom struggled to see eye to eye, and her mom didn't quite believe in her dream. My mom has always supported, both of my parents have always supported me, and they read all. My mom is the first reader of all my books, which I think is super duper fun. um and yeah, so a little bit like their relationship as they've grown closer, I think stems off of
mm,
that. They've become like friends.
that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, let's get into a little bit of pros and cons of writing a series, and just step back from the latest book and just kind of take a look at your thoughts about some of the benefits and some of the challenges, or some of the, maybe there's some pure disadvantages of writing a series that
Yeah.
you'd care to. Do you want to go through the pros first, the good things?
Yeah. Oh, what's really fun about writing a series is you have the same cast of characters through each book. And what's kind of cool then is, well, one, when you go to sit down to write a new book, you already have the characters and you already have the backstory and you already have some of these things kind of mapped out. Now that could also be like if you just love coming up with brand new characters, that could be a con. But sometimes for me, it's fun to revisit these familiar characters that I've really come to care about. And Parker's voice, it's so natural to me now. I can just fall right back into it. And it's like hanging out with an old friend, you know, that you haven't seen in a while, but you just pick up right where you left off. And so I think there's that is a major pro is you have these characters and you have their relationships together. And because that can take a lot of time brainstorming when you're coming up with all of that, you know, for standalones each time. Um, and now the other fun part is then you get to play a little bit more and you get to dig deeper with each character in each book. You can kind of explore little backstories that you might have sprinkled into book one might really come up in like book three and like I'm going to focus on this now and she, you know, the protagonist is really going to work on that. Or in this case, like I said, I sort of introduced the mother-daughter relationship, some of the strife and the conflict with that in book one, and it really in book four has come to just be something super cool. And you have more time to explore and to play with these characters that you're familiar with. So that's a
So
definite
that,
pro.
yeah, and that issue with the mother-daughter was sort of dormant there in the middle between the middle two books,
You
and
know,
or at least not as forefront.
yeah, I mean, and then book two is when they really they start really excuse me start really seeing eye to eye a little bit. And so they grow a little bit there. And then in book three, it's sort of dormant. There are other things that come up from Parker's past and other familial things that she is dealing with. And then it's in book four, it just, they become friends there. It's like it gets even better, even deeper.
Yeah.
So you can kind of play with all these different elements and see as they grow. And of course, there's even more room for them to continue. And that's the cool part. You know, life, there's never just a period with a relationship. You know, it's always going to keep going. And that's kind of cool. Um, yeah.
Did you have this mother-daughter issue going into book one? Did you know that this would become a recurring theme?
I did not when I was writing the first book. I did not. But I wanted some juicy conflict. You know, with cozy mysteries, usually it's really important to have a community and it's really important to have a familial element to it. And actually, I mean, you could argue in almost all genres, it's important to have those ties to your family, whether or not they're good, bad, even non-existent, that says something about your character and it gives you something to dig into. And so, yeah, in the first book, I sort of had some conflict there, but I never envisioned it would become what it is. But I'm really, really happy it has. So,
That's
yeah.
great. That's great. It's sort of one of those fortuitous things. You might not know what seeds you're actually planting as you begin to write that first book.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah. So is there a way to turn that into a idea or a tip for somebody who's just starting out? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, when you go to think about characters and you envision it being a series, I think it's nice to make sure that you sprinkle in some flaws in your characters in all of them. And it's always a fine line because you want them to still be compelling and likable, but nobody's perfect. And so sprinkling in enough little seeds of like maybe there's something in their backstory that is still bothering them, and it can be sort of innate and in the background, especially in the first book, but just planting these seeds. And maybe they, you know, her and or your character and a sibling or yeah, a mother or something, their familial component, or it could be with friends, you know, like young adults is big on like friend conflict in addition to, I mean, that's not just young adult, but you know, sprinkle in conflicts with your relationships in addition to characters. And it doesn't even just have to be the main character, it can be sidekicks too, because that's another fun thing about a series is in addition to just the protagonist, you have all these cool sidekicks that you create. Well, plant some seeds, give like one of them, you know, an ambition that maybe doesn't come out in the first book, but that could in a future one. And so I think a tip would be, yeah, to plant some flaws for maybe future growth for a character, and also just with the sidekicks too. And don't make every relationship perfect. You know, perfect relationships I think are kind of boring to read about. It's more interesting if there's some conflict in almost every area and everything. So yeah, that's a tip for just creating characters is give them room to grow and relationships
yeah.
room to grow.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
What other the positive elements of writing a series?
Yeah. So one for me that I loved is getting to set it in Colorado and
Mhm.
having a series. It's been kind of cool because in the first book, I have them, it's in Boulder. So like they go to Chautauqua and they go to Pearl Street, but then, you can't have all of these different settings because you only have so many pages. But then in book two, you can expand your world a little bit and showcase other gems that you wanted to. And so it's like they go to downtown Denver. In the fourth book, they go to Red Rocks to a concert, and just, I think it's playing around with your setting and your world, and you can keep grounding the reader even more. Just keep them coming back to this place that they love and keep it satisfying and also keep it fresh for me and fresh for the reader. That's one of the challenges. But I also think a
What?
pro, or yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah. Well, and as the character goes around in future books, they might run across a scene or a location that might recall an earlier story, which would give them a natural chance to recollect about something. So if there was a key showdown or they caught somebody at Chautauqua Park or there was a big chase, the next time they go through there, it's a natural way for them to just do a quick sentence to refer to another episode,
Oh,
perhaps.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Which is, yeah, which is so, I think, so important for these long lasting series that you do call out that, like, oh, this is where I was in real trouble once. and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
having them, and I think that gives an opportunity, a really natural one too, to have them sort of like, there's always this thing, like, for especially in cozy mysteries, but make sure the effects, that it's ongoing, the things that they struggled with before, that they don't just forget all about being in trouble or being contending with a murderer from book one. When you get to the second book, it's not like just a clean page. It is like you call back to that stuff over and over again. So
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Good. What else on the upside before we get to the negatives? Anything?
Oh boy. Well, and this is going to the tropes a little bit. I don't want to skip ahead, but I think one of the pros is, when you write a series, it gives you an opportunity to play with tropes. And when I say tropes, like mystery tropes, it's like, I had a lot of fun doing the grand unveiling, the unmasking, where the detective slowly, or amateur sleuth in this case, goes around the room and slowly says, well, you didn't do it. You didn't do it. And then they lead up to this big unmasking. Like that's what and there's tropes in every genre. And I think it's super fun to be able to, before I even start writing one of the next installments, is think through, well, which one am I wanting to try my hand at this time? And it's kind of fun. You get to explore that. And I know you can do that with standalones too. You can challenge yourself in different ways, but I think it's fun with a series because you can't always lean on what you've done before. You have to keep it fresh. And the aha moments, it's like this fun challenge that I appreciate, of like, oh, well, I had this sort of aha moment in book one, so I can't do that. What else is there? And I think it leads to just, I don't know, richer fiction, I hope.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Can you talk about, without doing any spoilers, can you talk about how you did the reveal moment, either in the new book or one of the other three?
Yeah. Oh, so fun. It's so fun. I mean, the hard part for this is making it moderately believable with like a law enforcement agent like buying into it, right?
Right, right, sure. Yeah,
And the setup. But I
yeah,
sort of have Parker, it's the idea that like the culprit is going to make a run for it if they sense anything amiss. And so Parker sort of stages this, and that's in Mauled to Death, the third one. So she stages this sort of happy hour with her mulled wine and ties in all of these elements. And but in doing so, she sort of takes the stage and goes around and says, well, we actually know who did it. And like, you didn't do it. You didn't do it. You were lying, but it wasn't you. And so it was a lot of fun, to actually write that.
that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's obviously that would probably never happen in a real investigation out in the quote real world. But we accept that in the genre. And that's, to me, that's the definition, one of the definitions of sort of giving an idea what a trope is. It's
Mhm.
something that is just the way we expect it, even like in the movie Knives Out or Glass Onion, that kind of, it's unrealistic, but that's okay. We buy into it. We accept the premise that this is a wonderfully dramatic way to get to the conclusion of all the detectives' work.
Absolutely. Gosh, aren't those
Yeah,
movies great? Talk about
yeah,
great mysteries. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. They're a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Yeah, very well written, I thought. Very well written. Great. Anything else on the pro side before we get to some of the challenges and cons?
Boy. Um,
I guess I have one question for you on the
yeah.
pro side, and that is just more on the business side of it. Do you find it a positive to have your name out there and connected with a brand, a series? If these had all been 4 standalones, do you think it might have been more challenging in a way to get your name out there and just be marketing yourself? I mean, maybe it's hard to compare apples and oranges, but your 4th book is on the way. You really are attached to this brand of the Colorado Wine Mystery, and that I would think that that's a positive in some ways.
Yeah. So there's a few things you brought up. Like, this is such a good question. So, yeah. So I think now one thing is for Cozy Mysteries, they are usually a series. So, and I do
Yeah,
think there's a huge, it's a huge pro to have a series because whenever one of the subsequent books comes out, it gives a little bump to those prior books because people see the 4th book and they're like, oh, well, what's this? I've maybe never seen this before. And they go and look up book 1. So there is that element of introducing new readers with each book, even though it is a series. And I mean, they can be read standalone, but series, it's kind of fun, I think, for people to go back to the
yeah,
beginning. So I think from business wise, it makes it, and like I said, for me with a brand, with like a Cozy Mystery brand, it totally makes sense. And I'm really proud of the series. I think one tip I always want to give writers, and especially new writers, is when you're going on submission or you're querying agents, you make sure you believe in that book you're going to be sending out there. You make sure you are going to be okay talking about it for years to come, because you will be. And I think a really important thing too is always being able to answer the question of like, well, why am I writing this? And I have to be able to do that with every one of the books. What's the purpose? Why am I the one to tell this story? And
yep,
and so that's something that I just think is so important. And, when I first caught the publishing bug years and years ago at this point, I was writing in a different genre, and like I could not have stood behind those manuscripts yet. I wasn't ready. And so with this series, I really believe in it and I love it. And it's been a lot of fun. And so yeah, as far as brands go, I'm really happy about it. Standalones, I think, are interesting. Now, a lot of standalones that I've been seeing lately, you still sell like 2 books maybe in one go. Like a publisher might acquire the rights to like the book in question, the manuscript they read, but then they also want to show support of the author. So they'll acquire like the second, like their next book, whatever that might be. So you do see that sometimes. And I think when books come out like within a year or a year after each other, it definitely that gives an author a boost, because again, people are reading this new book. It might be a new audience and they're going back to look at prior works. So you have that too. But yeah, and the other thing too about Cozy, I'm sorry, I'm rambling now.
no, no,
The other nice thing about
no,
the series, again, with having that cast of characters established and having the world established, is that they're a little bit faster for me to write. I've written a couple standalones in between when I've like been in between the contracts, or between drafts, whatever. When I've been waiting, waiting is always a part of publishing, no matter where you are in it.
right,
But
right, yeah,
um, but these I can draft a little bit faster just because I have all of those established characters and relationships. And I think that's a huge pro is, you can write a draft in 4 months. And
right,
so
right. And the 4 months is that's a draft, or is that a couple of drafts, or is that
that's a
just
4 months for one of these is a first draft. Now my first draft's
yeah,
and then
okay,
it's about 6 months total from when I have something I can send my editor usually.
right, right. Yeah, I just want to go back a couple of minutes or a couple of paragraphs up
Yeah.
and underscore your point about how much you have to believe in what you're putting out there. And I think I completely agree with that. That is 1,000% true. And I also just wanted to point out to folks, you spent a lot of years writing and writing before you got published, and you really stuck with it, and kind of acquired a voice, or something happened along the way where you finally got that deal. But it was not, talk about waiting. You were around Rocky Mountain Mystery Writers for years and years before something sparked.
Oh yeah, it was about a decade, I think,
Okay.
between when I first started and then when my book came out. It was something like that. And yeah, it was,
Yeah.
and I was working away the whole time writing manuscripts. My first book of this series was my fourth manuscript that I wrote. And I
Yeah.
think with writing, something that I've especially learned is, yeah, you got to love the process and love what it does for you, without having the expectations of it necessarily. I hate to say like going somewhere, but like that's not the point. That shouldn't be the point.
Right.
And so yeah, I worked a long, yeah, it was a long time, and you know, you enjoy the ride.
Yeah. 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 You
While you're
have
doing
to.
it, you live
Yeah.
life and you enjoy the ride and you work hard, and yeah. And
Yeah.
I felt very lucky when I got my book deal. I feel very fortunate still. So
Yeah. Is it a little bit hard to even remember back to that decade now that you're focused on deadlines and meeting contract needs?
yeah, it is. I think my
Yeah.
dream was always, hey, I just want to see my book in a bookstore. That was always my dream. And
Yeah.
after the bookstores opened up after COVID with all of this, I was
Yeah.
able to go do that and I accomplished that
Yeah.
dream. But it's funny how that bar raises, and it is hard to see back to where I came from. Um, because yeah, then there's new goals. Now I would just want to keep
Yeah.
writing and keep
Yeah.
doing it. But
That's
yeah,
good.
keep perseverance. That's like I think the number one thing a writer has to have, because you can work hard and you can learn, and you hone your voice. You learn in by doing critique groups. You learn how to take feedback and how to say no. I'm going to stick with my gut on this, and you learn all these things along the way, and yeah, just keep growing.
Yeah. So what about some of the major challenges of writing a series then?
Yeah, so I think challenges are right of writing a series. Now, this was like kind of one of the pros, but it's keeping things fresh. While I find that to be something, I think it's a fun challenge for me. It is a challenge, and you have to remember. And I don't know how somebody like Louise Penny or some of like, um, you know, there are people who have like 26 books in the, especially in the cozy world, like plus. I don't know how they remember, because I know you spend a lot of time writing and you pour your heart and your soul onto the page and all that. But I do think at some point you've got to start mixing things up in your brain, and it's got to be hard to remember. But yeah, so for me, it's sometimes like, well, what's for mystery specific? It's something like, well, what was the murder weapon in book one? Well, it was poison. So I can't do poison again. What am I going to do here? And
Yeah.
then, of course, it's like the who done it and the aha moment. And, this is true across all genres. I'm sure there's different things like that you have to contend with, and just trying to remember what you've done before and then do something different, and keep it fresh. And that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a major challenge. Keep it fresh for readers.
Yep. Yep. It also must be a little hard to keep track of character details and little things like, I mean, it's been published, it's out there, but you might have to stop and go back on a minor character and kind of check hair color and how many family members they have, or, just little details that some readers will catch those inconsistencies.
Oh yeah, eye color is a big one for me. I can never remember the
Yeah.
eye color. Like, what did I
Yeah.
say for
Yeah.
this one
Yeah.
side character? And it's important. I think, yeah, that's important. So I do go back to old manuscripts a lot, to like the copy edited versions, especially the more final ones, and have to go, okay, what was that? Um, I do think it's helpful. My copy editors have a tip sheet that they send me
Yeah.
with all the characters, and it's ongoing for the series, and they have their
Yep.
eye color there. So sometimes I just
Yep.
pull that out every time I'm wondering. So yeah, that's a really good point. And along with characters, I just think with the characters, there needs to be an arc, a character arc in every individual book in a series. And then there needs to be some that maybe stretch through the whole thing. And that's where the relationships come in handy, is because you can change a relationship and force a character into confront certain parts of who they are or what they might struggle with. But having those individual arcs in each book, is something too, where you have to think about, well, what is Parker going to learn in this story? And how am I going to resolve it in a way that still gives her room to grow in the future, perhaps, but also makes the reader feel like, okay, she learned something in this book, and like this is a good resolution. So I think that's hard too. A series is,
Yep. Is there, and the tips on all of that is, I mean, as you pointed out earlier, is just really using your imagination and, looking for inspiration in new places, because if you keep going back or focusing on what you've done in the past and just sort of dwelling on that, you're going to keep your little inspiration box kind of tight. You've got to go to new and different sources to, yeah.
and that's where reading is so handy, right? Read everything you can get your hands on, and watch everything that inspires you, and fill that creative well, and give yourself ideas. The other thing
Yeah.
that I like to do sometimes, and this is a big, I don't know if you do you read reviews, Mark?
Yes, I do.
You do. I read
Yes,
reviews
I
too.
do. Yep.
Mhm. Um,
Yep.
yeah, that's something where some writers, or or like, I don't want to read a review. I actually like it because sometimes it gives me ideas. Like, people love the
Mm-hmm.
cats in my series. People love the cats. And so I add more cats. Sometimes it's like, well, is there a creative way I can incorporate, like book 3 has this really fun subplot with the feline, and like it's
Ah,
really cutesy, but like I don't know that I necessarily would have gone there if I hadn't read reviews where everybody was just like, more cats, they're
yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think reading reviews is a great way to stay fresh too, and to make sure you're giving readers what are the things that they're enjoying about the series. Let's make sure we do more of that. um and that has its hard parts too, right? But yeah, I like that's another tip, I guess.
Yeah. Has a review ever stopped you or given you pause in terms of how you were doing something?
Yeah, well, you know what? And nobody likes, well, this isn't true. Some people are really into like love triangles, but in cozy mystery, I would say like 85% of people were like, oh, I sense a love triangle and I don't want to go there. I don't want it. And so I had maybe thought about like, oh, maybe I'll just tease this out a little bit longer. And then I decided, it was like, no, nope, we're going to end that. We're going to nip that in the bud right away, because I could tell people are really unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's not to say there couldn't be a triangle in the future, but for at that moment I read so much and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is a huge thing. I didn't know this was such a capital T thing in
Yeah. Huh.
in that
Yeah.
world.
It's always hard to know how much weight to put into a comment from a reader or a review. And sometimes I recently had a fairly prominent, I would say very prominent review that mostly liked my latest novel. But the writer of the review, a woman, said something that no other person had said. And I'm talking about all my beta readers, let's say it's 8 or 10 beta readers, my agent, my agent's assistant, my editor. I had a developmental editor who we went through 3 stages of developmental editing. And then this review comes along and says that when my main character meets a woman, that I stop and just describe the woman physically, and I don't do anything else. Or I don't know, it's sort of a mean little comment that to me it was very mean, because first of all, nobody else had said that. Secondly, I don't think I do it. The editor who bought it is a woman. I had lots of beta readers or females who read it, and nobody else pointed this out. So somehow she was just stuck on this one point. But ever since all my writing, when I'm working on something new, that is in the back of my head. That one line in a review is just eating away at me. And
Oh,
obviously I shouldn't put that much weight into it, but there it is. It just sits there. So maybe it's a cautionary tale about not reading your reviews. I don't know,
I
but
know. Well, and Mark, I'm going to hold up your book for people listening to the audio. I'm
okay.
holding up a copy of Mark's book. I was one of the female readers that read your book, and I didn't notice any of that. I know that's kind of a trend right now that I think people are sometimes maybe try to call out, but I didn't notice that at all. I loved your
Yeah.
book. So just
No,
to give it
thanks.
a little boost, if
Yeah.
anybody hasn't read it, any baseball fans out there,
Uh,
especially, oh man, it was so good. It was a good character novel. So yeah,
oh, thank
so
you.
I hope you don't beat yourself up about that.
Yeah, it's sort of an interesting point about, because if you do open yourself up to reading those, you have to be able to, and I think I'm pretty good at filtering out. I've got lots of negative reviews, but you do have to open yourself up and be prepared to filter.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you know
Yeah.
what? And that's gotten easier over time, I think. I don't know about for you, but like at first, oh, and with my first book, I got a 1-star review and somebody said it was like a bad French film. And it made me laugh so hard. I mean, now I can laugh a little bit but that one I was like, wait, what? What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, these days stuff I kind of, it's like it just bounces off of you and you're like, oh, somebody don't like it. Okay, well.
Yeah. 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 That's great. That's great.
But it is
Very
hard.
good.
It is hard. So, but
Yeah.
your book was so great. I don't know. I didn't notice that at all. So I'm surprised to
Well,
hear that.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, that was
Um,
very sensitive.
so rolling into book 5, I assume book 5 is underway or done?
Not yet. Well, this is where it gets interesting, right? So like I
Okay.
finished book 3 and I didn't know if there would be a book 4. And then got a contract for book 4, very exciting. And now book 5 is I turned the proposal is with my publisher now, and they're sort of considering it. They like to see how book 4 does, which makes sense. So we'll see. My proposal is about it's the first 2 chapters and then a very detailed outline, which is about 8 pages single space for me. So I do have an idea, and like I have all of the series stuff, like the character arcs, and I have sort of the mystery and all of that formulated. And so we'll see. It'd be a lot of fun to write, but at the same time, if yeah, book 4 doesn't sell enough or it isn't resonating with readers
Yeah.
anymore, then on to the next thing. But
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's sort of where it is with book 5. And that's where I think it gets interesting with this series in particular is when I started it, I knew there would be 3. I didn't know there would be 4. And so it's like with 4, I was really careful. And I heard this tip once from a fellow writer who said, always end your book as if it could be your last. Like end the
Ah,
series book, even if you're contracted for more, just end it in a way that you'll be happy if that's it. And
ah,
that kind of stuck with me. So I try to do that now.
oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. How soon do you think you'll know how book 4 does? Is that a matter of months or?
Probably pretty quick, I would think,
Okay.
because book it comes out March 7th, and so usually they'll want to have another book like in a year or so is usually how it is with cozies,
Yeah.
keep it going. So I'll probably hear in another month,
Yeah.
maybe 2, but hopefully
Yeah.
not that. I mean, again, it's the waiting game. It's always there. Yeah.
Yeah. So there are challenges to writing a series, obviously, but the challenges lead to better product, and they force you to expand your thinking about it, and you have to meet those challenges head on. And if you're aware of the challenges, then you also will be sort of anticipating what the reader might be concerned with, and therefore surpass the reader's expectations and be able to say, I knew what you were going to say if I did this, so I'm going to head over here, and hopefully you'll appreciate the effort.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be. I think as much as I love this series, I actually have an idea for another cozy series, and I think it would be really fun to start from a book 1 again, just because of how much I've learned. And I think it would be just interesting to like right off of the get go, be able to dive in fresh with some of these tips like plant enough seeds of conflict and just knowing, especially what cozy readers and what your audience enjoys, you can highlight that stuff right at book 1. And I don't know. So we'll see. It's
Yeah.
kind of it's exciting, I think, too.
Yeah. Yeah, are you pitching that one already? Despite,
No, not yet. So that one,
yeah,
I know it's so tricky, and like this is a thing for writers out there who are struggling, I think, in the trenches and the query trenches, is just know like there's always ambiguity, and you're always kind of facing that like, well, if sales aren't good enough for book 4, like I get it, like let's do
yeah,
something different. And so but the way it works though is my publisher has really backed me and been super supportive. And the way, if they don't go for a book 5, my hopes would be maybe we could send them this proposal and maybe we'll do that. And so, but we're kind of waiting to see what happens with book 5. The one thing I don't want to do is end up under contract and like not be able to fulfill stuff. So
Right.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we'll, yeah, one thing at a time though. So we'll kind of see what happens here, and then, and yeah, go
Good.
from there.
Well, congratulations on book 4, imminent book 4. And
Yeah.
thank you for all of this. It's been a great discussion. Yeah, really interesting stuff.
Yeah.
As we wrap up, we always like to give our guests a chance to promote a book or an author and, pass it forward, pay it forward a little bit. So the floor is yours.
Yeah. Yeah. So I already talked about your book, which is one I was going to mention, but I'm going to bring up another one, and this is Dead in Gondola by Anne Clare. I know. Oh, this one is so good. It's a cozy mystery by a local author, and it is really, for mystery lovers, it's a super duper fun one because it's sort of a locked room mystery, but on a gondola in a Colorado ski town, and it has there's like a mystery chateau bookstore and a cat named after Agatha Christie, and just like it's a really, really good one. So I wanted to make sure to mention that. And it's, yeah, Dead in Gondola, the first book of a Christie Bookshop mystery series. So
Oh, great. Very good.
Very fun.
Is the mountain town named? Is it a real mountain town, or is it another one of the fictionalized versions like your Winter Park?
I believe it's a fictionalized one.
Okay. Right.
And it's like your small stereotypical sort of, but like in a really fun way, small mountain town, and you have to take a gondola up to the bookshop and gondola back down, and it's snowy. I mean, and for me, it felt very Colorado.
That's great.
Especially right
That's
now,
great.
this winter. So yeah. And I just want to thank you for having me on again, Mark. I always have such a great time chatting with you and talking, writing, and yeah, and everything.
Yeah, well, you're welcome anytime. It's always great to have you on. One of these days, all you cozy writers will tell us what pun school you go to come up with stuff like Till Death Do Us Part and Dead in Gondola. And there must be some secret club where you come up with this stuff, but it's pretty impressive. So
Oh, and it's
anyway,
fun. Oh, and
yeah,
it's so fun. If you can make yourself laugh while you're coming up with a title, then
yeah,
all the
that's very
better.
good. Good luck out there, Kate. Thanks a
Yep.
million.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye, Mark.